Good morning. Are we ready to start? I think we are. We already have the academic quarter. So good morning. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm Stefan Moser from DG Energy Unit Security of Supply, and I would like to welcome you to the second day of the PCI Days. Yesterday was the high-level event, and I would like to welcome also very much our panelists, which is Robert Schröder to my right side, then Vuga Veisalov, head of external affairs from TAP. Robert Schröder, I forgot to mention, is from NSOE, working on system development. Then to my left is Herko Plitt, from the CEO from Baltic Connector. Then Simon Ludlam from Greenlink, and then from the Energy Community Secretariat, Adam Balog. So welcome very much to the session this morning. So just from a policy point of view, the PCIs are absolutely crucial to close the gaps between the different countries and of course towards external sources in order to diversify, to make us basically fit for a proper functioning internal market. In the internal market there are of course also regulatory issues, wholesale, retail issues, but the physical part is extremely important and is also from our point of view essential to have a kind of thorough evidence-based analysis of what is needed, because of course many projects seem attractive from a first glance, but when you have a closer look, then they're not really needed. But therefore it's important to direct the resources to those which provide the biggest benefit basically for the internal market, for security of supply, but also for ensuring that the energy can flow everywhere it should, and keep prices down through enhanced competition in the market, so that citizens can have cheaper, more affordable energy. And we have various sources and forms of cooperation. We have across the member states and the TSOs, as you know, we have transmission system operators, distribution system operators. With the clean energy package, we encourage closer and closer cross-border cooperation. The creation of a DSO entity, for instance, that's very important. Then regional cooperation between the member states. So we have EU-level cooperation, which is important for the overall coherence, but then also regional cooperation, both on gas and electricity, to address the risks which are identified for certain parts of the internal market, depending on where either the gas comes from or how the electricity is produced. And that is basically what we are now going to implement in the next few years through proper risk assessments, but also then national plans which are based on cross-border assistance measures for security of supply for both electricity and gas. But all that relies very much on the infrastructure which is available and the rules governing that infrastructure. For gas, of course, we have quite an emphasis on making sure that we have diversification of sources, also LNG available as a kind of very flexible instrument. And for electricity, the big focus is on making sure that renewable energy can play its full role in the future, that basically the grid is stable enough and provides a big enough pool, reduces the bottlenecks which are there. But with that short introduction, I would like to hand over basically to the panelists, and would like to ask maybe first Robert to give us the overall picture, because NSOE is absolutely crucial in that respect. They do the long-term assessments, the mid-term assessments, so 10 years, 5 years, but also the seasonal assessments ahead for the next winter or summer, where usually the situation is most crucial. And that is basically probably the most important starting point for both the member states, the TSOs, but also the Commission to identify any challenges which need to be addressed. Robert, would you like to continue, please?
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good morning to all of you. Let me ask you first a question. Who of you know what is SOS, security of supply in electricity? Who knows it? I'm sure there are a couple of engineers, they know what it is. But I think it's a very theoretical concept, isn't it? Who of you already experienced lack of electricity? So really need for electricity, but no electricity available. Who of you? I assume that those who raise their hands have traveled quite far and may have had this kind of experience in countries which are probably quite remote. We are lucky enough here in Europe that brownouts, blackouts happen, but very rare. I think it's important really to be aware about the consequences of lack of electricity. I think it has two dimensions. One is more underdeveloped countries where there is a lack due to, let's say, lack of investment in proper infrastructure. But as well, we should have the dimension of climate change, meaning renewable integration, in particular in electricity grids, with its consequences on security of supply. And here I would like to emphasize that electricity has very special characteristics. Electricity is happening very, very fast. So you might have just a few minutes between first event and then cascading events, making things worse and worse. So this kind of very fast, let's say, a spreading of risks of events being on a local level, on regional level, be it even on pan-European level, is a specific feature of electricity we should be aware of. So having said that, I think the question of how to ensure security of supply in electricity covers all the different time frames starting from investment. Yes, you must design and invest in hardware, but as well in software. Digitalization is a really important word in this context. You must invest in time frames +5, +10, +15 years, probably even beyond. Plan now for the system in 2030, 2040, and look what is happening if you don't have the grid to integrate renewables. But as well, of course, you have to look at the operational planning phase mentioned by Stefan earlier. So looking about a couple of months, a year ahead, getting prepared for the risks of electricity system. Here, a strong combination between gas and electricity is very important. And then all the way down to system operation into week ahead, day ahead, and then real time. Just a second. So having said that, there are quite some new developments we should be aware of. The main driver in the European system is integration of renewables. Important here is to understand that we replace rotating masses. So we had inherent stability through large rotating masses, more and more through converter-driven, be it small decentralized or be it large renewable wind farms or solar farms. That basically means that in the very short term, we call it inertia, we foresee significant challenges to future system operation with large share of renewables. And this one we have, of course, to, let's say, address both in investment timeframes. Here, well, you allow me to refer to TYNDP type of planning where security of supply indicators are addressed, but it goes beyond this one, and we can see that specifically in systems which are a more island behavior. I think yesterday there had been a big blog about the Baltic integration. Baltic integration will require not only hardware investments as planned, an additional DC cable, but as well a lot of measures in order to stabilize frequency, synchronous condensers, and so on, in order to ensure security of supply in this kind of island system. If you have island systems where same time the ambition to integrate renewables is high, we have it in Ireland, we have it in Sardinia, in Sicilia, in other places, new technologies, or sometimes it's old technology, but with new applications like the synchronous condensers, like flexibility, are getting really very important. Having said that, coming from hardware investments, I think we should look a little bit more at digitization as well. The need for flexibility in the systems will grow enormous if you look at 2030. And this flexibility will have not only to be provided, but as well to be handled on system level. So IT systems being able to handle it from a security point of view, including TSOs, DSO, data hub, we call it often, so information flow, make it happen, to have distributed generation, to have flexibility from distribution system operators correctly linked into the whole system, plays a very, very strong role. But as well, further developments in IT sector connecting TSOs on European level. Here, I think the most important word is common grid modeling. The regional initiatives had already been mentioned by Stefan. And here one of a real big IT investment is on its way to ensure that all TSOs all over Europe talk the same language, have the same information, can react fast and coordinated across border in order to enable integration of renewables. Apart from this, there are a lot of technology, innovative technology on the plate. Batteries, everybody talks about it. Already up to size of 100 megawatts are in pilot and test phases, as well as wide area monitoring, so GPS-based systems which look at phase angles at the different places in the grid. Very ambitious concerning IT security in order to know the system state. Dynamic line rating, a very important initiative as well, where quite a lot of TSOs nowadays link dynamic line rating into real-time system operation. All this is heavy driven by IT, but IT with special security environments as well. To mention is embedded HVDC. So imagine that we come from a system running ACs, using rotating masses all over Europe. More and more we integrate HVDC devices, most of them point-to-point, under discussion as well, multi-terminal. These kind of devices give operational possibilities to steer load flows which support the security of supply. Now, I think I shouldn't use too much time of the session, but still I will have to mention the sector coupling. I think it's really very important. We started already a couple of years ago to look at stress testing. What is happening if in the gas system there are major disruptions or major problems? What kind of effect will it have on electricity and the other way around? We started with it. There is a lot of improvement to be done as well. We know about it, so it will be continuous improvement environment. But as well, if we don't look too much at the costs of sector coupling in power-to-gas technology, which is evolving, it of course provides as well flexibility, and it provides as well potential of huge storages, so seasonal storage, and last but not least, specifically existing distribution infrastructure, which could be used. So having said this, I just would like to make a last point on pure innovation, research and development. There had been some Horizon 2020 projects like Garpur, like iTesla, like Umbrella. All of them, of course, research and development, taking some time in order to be implemented in TSO's environment. But already now, some island operators are looking closely at these kind of, let's say, it's very strong digitalization. It's getting away from N-1 type of security into probabilistic security in the grid areas as well. So these kind of research and development projects are ongoing to be prepared in time for the challenges to come in security of supply in electricity. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that comprehensive overview. You pointed out notably that flexibility is basically the key of the system, and reducing communication barriers, speaking the same language in particular in terms of reducing information costs, that rules are not standing in the way from the software side, and that basically is needed also to operate hardware in an efficient manner. So I think that is really important. We are trying to work that the market functions in the optimal manner. The market is the best insurance for and assurance for security of supply, and only if that is then coming to an end for whatever shock that happens, then we need specific interventions involving possibly even the public authorities to ensure secure supply. But in the first place, the market should work, and for that we need infrastructure. And indeed, the TAP and the Baltic Connector are very important regional projects which have a wider dimension. First, Herko Plitt would please elaborate on the Baltic Connector, which is extremely important for linking Finland and Estonia, the Baltic member states, which basically takes away the relative isolation of Finland, and improves much the situation in the other Baltic countries. Herko, please, would you like to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, there. And in order to ensure that everybody's waking up also this morning there, so I also posed a couple of questions in the beginning there. So how many of you then knew before Stefan introduced there what is the Baltic Connector? About half then, so that is very, very, so to say, good result here. So normally it's a little less there. So somebody told me yesterday that in Brussels this is very well-known process there, so this seems to be the case there. And then another issue is there that how many of you know there that Baltic Connector will be ready end of this year? A little bit less, but that's really the situation where we are, and we started our operational activities in 2016 there, and now we have really been doing the project, and first started with the permitting then and also then I would say heavy procurement projects, which is of course in such a case there, so it's public procurements and all these issues, and then the actual construction started then practically last year, and now we have been constructing and it's including then, so to say, all the elements in Finnish side is onshore. There will be 2 compressor stations, Finland and Estonia, and there will be the first Baltic, so to say, EU offshore project, which is there. So you know that there's some other project as well in the Baltic. And then also in Estonia we have the onshore section there. And that would be everything ready by end of this year then, and then very important issue which Stefan was already mentioning is there, that this was not only the security of supply project, but the market functioning. And in connection with our project, then it was decided by the legislation that the Finnish gas market will be open 1st of January 2020. So we are not only having the pressure from the Commission who is funding us, we are also having the pressure from our government and parliament there that get the project done on time there, and so that the market can really start functioning. Now we are doing our best, and of course, in the beginning, so to say, the starting point was there that we are having 100% supplies from Russia, and it's better to have the diversified gas supplies, although I have to mention there's never been any discrepancy with the supplies, but it's always good to have an option. But after some time, it become very evident there that it's not only that we're having a pipeline there, which is for the security of supply, that the market functioning there is something which is crucial for it, then, and that is also then ensuring the security of supply aspect then. And that's which we have been now working with Finland and the Baltic countries very much there, so and we have been very, so I would say, despite being involved myself there, but we are very efficient. We have now signed in February the first ITC agreement, meaning there that there will be no tariffs between Finland and Estonia on the Baltic Connector, no tariffs between Estonia and Latvia there, so there's a common entry tariffs and so forth. And this is something which is unique in Europe there, like there's a saying, if there's a will, there's a way. And of course we will continue this, that also that Lithuania would join there, the market area there, and the target would be that by 22 there would be common market zone, including Finland and the Baltic countries there. That is, so to say, the one aspect which is there. Of course, then, so to say, the infrastructure you are constructing is providing us then, so to say, the possibility to have the market functioning. On the other hand, then when we are having this project with our PCI funded, we have to ensure there that this provides then the feasibility for the market to function as well then. And by that I'm meaning there that the market integration becomes more and more crucial there, because the more liquidity we want to have in the market, then it means the less borders and less tariffs we need to have there. And that is, I think, it's our common EU-wide issue which we have to tackle there, that this first step which we have now taken with this ITC agreement, market integration, needs to be continued, because if the market is really functioning, then and that ensures also the security of supply. Then another point which I want to raise is there the storage capabilities there, and Robert was also mentioning there the sector coupling, and I think this is very, very important there that we are going for that, because more and more in the future the energy production will be decentralized, and which means there that energy transfer will have a more and more crucial role, and in that we cannot simply rely on the electricity there. And if we are considering then the potential with the gas infrastructure is having, this is immense. The batteries is good there, but we cannot really rely on long term on those. I have very often mentioned the example of this Tesla battery in Australia, the largest one in the world there, 129 megawatt hours there. That would last for 50 seconds for Finnish consumption, and Finland is a small country there. So that gives us the dimension how the batteries can work. If we take then, so to say, the capacity which can be stored in the gas infrastructure, we are talking about terawatt hours and so forth. So that potential is something which is very much there, and therefore we have to ensure that the gas infrastructure will be in a place also in the future. This, in other terms, then means there that we have to go for the green gas, because fossil gas will be phased out if we are not doing it. That politicians will do it very quickly there, and we as an industry or the, so to say, who are working around the energy have to ensure that also the viability of the gas will be accepted by the public in the long term there. So this transmission for the green gas then, and also utilizing the potential of the storage of this gas infrastructure is, I think, it's one of the crucial milestones of the security of supply aspect in the future. The third item is then when we are talking about this artificial intelligence and also utilizing of the real-time data. It's an opportunity, and I'm sure that it's something which will benefit our market very much there. But on the other hand, there are the threats then, because the cybersecurity comes into the question there, and this is an area then which is very little considered then, and how easily the systems could be shut down and so forth there. So I would raise that this is also the issue that in the future we have to very much look into there, how the cybersecurity issues are ensured, because as Robert was saying there, who has have the case there that we are losing electricity there. This might be then the case there that we are losing our energy system there, and which would be even larger case than losing only the electricity there. So that is something that we also have to focus. But like I said, that we are now building the basics there, getting the infrastructure done, get the market functioning there, and that provides also then the stability for the European security of supply. Thank you.
Erkko, for that. I fully agree that basically we also need to look at the digitalization challenges like cybersecurity, and I think what is crucial that you have pointed out also that Finland has had a very reliable long-term relationship with the gas supplier, Russia in this case, but there's basically one pipeline, and even if the political experience has been good, there may always be a technical disruption, for instance, of that pipeline. That's the benefit of creating that additional flexibility besides the market functioning, because you can then rely on gas coming in on an ad hoc basis. And this may be, as we've seen, there may be sometimes repairs, there may be leakages in a pipeline, there may be an unfortunate explosion, as it happens, unfortunately, sometimes, and there may be a cybersecurity attack, which is also happening often from unknown actors. And then it's important to have basically a backup infrastructure in place which can help. Even if basically you take complete abstraction from the political point of view, and I must also underline this context that we have no policy against any country, any gas supplier, for instance. The objective is really to create options for better functioning of the market and to prepare for any disruption which can happen, such as a technical one as well. So it's not a politically motivated project. It's one which is there for creating options for better market functioning and being able to react if needed. And we very much are fond of, if I may use a kind of more emotional word, of this project, because it's really obvious in terms of benefits for Finland and the Baltic countries, which also take their own important efforts to create a more integrated market across the 3 Baltic countries, which have a very similar history and also partly similar interests and objectives. But still, there are quite a number of challenges to make everyone work alongside. And of course, can bring in also the LNG terminal from Lithuania. And in the future, there will also be a link between Lithuania and Poland. So it will basically be a complete integration then of the Northeastern European member states. With that, I think we can move over to the Southeast. And the TAP pipeline is not just for the Southeast, of course, but it's primarily, of course, serving countries which so far have relied mostly on one source, but it links also up to Italy, which is then basically the full integration into the internal market, because Italy has already quite a number of flexibility options and pipelines, but it's basically the entire southern gas corridor, which we are very, very fond of as well, if I may use the same word. And I would therefore like to give the floor to Hvdc to introduce further the TAP project.
Thank you, Stefan. Very good morning to you all. I'm not too sure whether I should be asking the same question that previous speakers have asked, whether anyone knows what TAP project is all about. Fantastic, then I have something to talk about. If I may, I'll go to the podium. Can you hear me? Good. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here. Good morning all again. Well, this conference, the PCI Days conference, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for ourselves as a gas transporter company to actually present what we're all about, what we do, and where we are. TAP, as you know, is the European leg of the Southern Gas Corridor, and it continues progress on schedule. It brings us closer to opening up the Southern Gas Corridor that Stefan has mentioned, that has a huge importance for the European Union. Right. As I'm sure most of you know, the Southern Gas Corridor is one of the most complex gas value chains developed in the world, and it crosses around 6 countries, lasts about 3,500 kilometers. The Southern Gas Corridor is, without a doubt, one of the most important and tangible and mature projects being realized today. TAP has been selected as a project of common interest 3 times to this day, in 2013, 15, and 17, for its role, amongst others, in opening up the Southern Gas Corridor. It's one of the 2 so-called energy corridors identified by the European Union as priorities for the achievement of European energy policy objectives. Identifying TAP as PCI for 3 times in a row reinforces the highest political support of the EU and the member states for our project. The PCI status also allowed us to participate in the 2nd Connecting Europe facility back in 2016, and in November 2017 we were awarded around 14 million euro, which is currently being used for additional archaeological works in Greece. which is something that out of our core business, but again, puts Greece onto the map once again. But before enlarging on TAP's contribution to Europe's security of supply, I want to spend a few moments on our project progress. Right. As you can see, all the numbers are self-explanatory, but the progress in countries is tremendous. And I'm very pleased to say that we're over 85% complete in all 3 countries. In other words, since we started construction in May 2016 in Thessaloniki, we have made tremendous progress in the sense of putting the pipeline into the ground. So between Albania and Greece, we're almost 98% complete with the pipeline being in the ground. Compressor stations in Albania and in Greece are about 77% complete. In Italy, works are underway in pipeline receiving terminal, in onshore, as well as with a micro-tunnel site, which has been a great progress as well. We started work in the offshore, particularly in Albania. This is where landing point in Fier will take place. I think it's also pleasing to state that we managed to secure about 3.9 billion project finance in 2018, late last year, and this was the biggest European infrastructure project finance closed in the European Union. I also want to touch upon the cooperation with TANAP, the Trans-Anatolian pipeline. We are now connected since late last year, and we do look forward to sort of finalizing our work on preparations, alignment for commissioning. We've installed the pipeline at an altitude around 2,100 meters in the Albanian mountains, and we're about to start laying the pipe in the Adriatic Sea in close to 800 plus meters below the sea level. Despite such technically challenging work, our safety track record, I think, is world-class. We have worked over 110 million kilometers we have driven. That is without any major safety incident. What is that? 110 million kilometers is 2 times return ticket to Mars and back. We have worked over 38 million man-hours to this day, again, without any major safety incident. What it is, it's about building the Empire State Building for about 6 times. I also want to emphasize that TAP is important not only for Europe's energy mix and our host countries in general, but also for the local communities where we operate. We're implementing around 230 social and environmental projects in our communities where we operate, and we're spending over 55 million euros in that sphere. Now, coming back to today's topic, I really hope that this SOS abbreviation never stands for this actuality, SOS as we know it, but security of supply. Realizing TAP and opening the Southern Gas Corridor is a key step towards energy security and diversification, we believe, in Europe. To put things into perspective, the 10 BCM initially that we will transport to European Union is equivalent to around quarter of Greece's energy demand, Bulgaria's energy demand, and around 12% of the Italian energy demand. Destination of our project TAP in Italy is also a solid gas market. It's the second largest in continental Europe, and our landfall in Italy provides multiple opportunities for transporting the shah deniz gas from Azerbaijan all the way up north or west to Switzerland, Austria, France, even Belgium, and the UK. In turn, this will encourage market competition, offering a more competitive environment for end consumers. And we've seen that Italians are actually paying about 19% more for their electricity bills compared to their northern neighbors. We will also support market integration in Southeastern Europe via physical interconnection to infrastructure like IGB, as well as the IAP eventually. Southeastern Europe is one of the regions most prone to supply disruptions and the external shocks. So we see TAP as a very positive development in the wider Balkan region. But I think it's important also to emphasize that we will contribute to decarbonization. We will enable the introduction of cleaner energy into the European market, therefore contributing to reducing carbon emissions. Renewables and natural gas are, I think, natural partners, and given the intermittent nature of solar and wind energy, we believe that the Southern Gas Corridor will be able to at least partly address that issue. We will also have reverse flow capability in the event of an emergency or potential cutoff further upstream, and we will then ensure its long-term future with a built-in flexibility. Beyond 2020, once additional supplies are coming online as well, TAP could double its capacity to 20 billion cubic meters of gas to Europe, bringing an additional 10 billion cubic meters. This will mean that more opportunities for several EU markets will be in place. And once operational, we believe that TAP will play a strategic role in realizing the Energy Union's objectives. Therefore, we're very focused on operational readiness and start of commercial operations, and we remain confident that TAP will progress at its envisaged pace and deliver gas to the European Union in 2020 as promised. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vuga, for that very interesting overview and also the slides showing the geographical implications. And they demonstrate very visibly, basically, how important that project is in terms of providing a key alternative to countries which so far have not had that, and of course linking then also up to the energy community contracting parties going directly through Albania and providing through Bulgaria in the future also gas through to North Macedonia and Serbia. There will be further links. So this is really improving significantly the optionality where you can get gas from, and that is without prejudice of what necessarily the market players in the future will decide on where to buy in a concrete manner every day or every year gas from. The important thing is that, as said before by Erke also, that you can get it from elsewhere if needed, even on a short-term basis. If needed, if the market cannot provide it, then through the intervention of public authorities, through preventive action and emergency plans. So that is something which we need to make sure that the infrastructure is then also used to the full through the appropriate arrangements between the member states and the TSOs, and that will happen over the next few years. This will all be put in place. So we are quite confident that this project will be a key cornerstone and will allow us to build on it, basically, for significant improvements in Southeastern Europe. Then I would like to move over to Simon Ludlam from Greenlink, which is a very different project, of course, in northwestern Europe, but also key, linking Ireland and the UK. Simon, would you like to go further?
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Quite a different project. It's a 500 megawatt project linking Wales and Ireland together. They came together this weekend, if any of you watched the rugby, and Wales prevailed on that particular occasion. The project is an interesting one in that it's quite different from some of the projects we see connecting, say, the UK to continental Europe. We have a relatively small island. It's 1/10 the size of the United Kingdom, also GB, with different challenges. Today, Ireland is looking to grow quickly to meet its European targets for renewables, but at the same time, it has significant economic challenges to achieve that. It seems to me they have two conflicting, or not conflicting, but two important drivers. They've been very successful in getting Silicon Valley to invest in Ireland, not only intellectual capital, but also physical capital in terms of data centers and other large facilities that consume a large amount of energy. That's been great for Ireland's economy, it's another pillar. But those groups have been very clear with the government. They would like to continue to invest, but they need two things. They want it to be green energy, and they want security of supply. On the other side, we have Ireland that has been successful in developing probably its greatest natural resource, wind. And there's plenty of wind in Ireland. As in many countries in Europe, wind initially developed onshore, but after a period of time, I think there's a certain saturation or resistance from public to further wind farms. And therefore, the logical next step, an economic next step, is to move offshore. And Ireland would like to do that as well. Again, to do that, it needs to be affordable. It can't be done at any cost. And the security of supply is clearly there, but the wind developers want to know that when the wind blows, they'll be able to sell their power at a reasonable price without interruption. So I think these two things have really led the Irish government to reflect on how to develop these two drivers going forward. And I think one of the solutions to that is further interconnection. So Greenlink responds to that. It allows the government to show to Silicon Valley, in terms of when there's no wind, that they can import electricity from the United Kingdom, which is obviously well linked into continental Europe and will be further well linked in the future. And at the same time, for the wind developers, they can see that when the wind blows and there is an excess of energy on the grid, prices fall, that they'll be able to export to the higher price market of the United Kingdom, or GB. So these two things, I think, are driving Ireland to look very closely at interconnection, and we hope that Greenlink responds to that. Diversity is important, and I think is key to the security of supply, but one word of caution, I think interconnectors are not the silver bullet for everything, and if ultimately interconnectors just displace existing onshore already installed capacity, whichever form it's in, whether it's gas, fossil fuel or other, I think we need to be a little bit careful that we're not concentrating the risk of security of supply into an offshore cable. Greenlink is a little bit different from some of the TSO-sponsored projects. It is private capital. Our shareholders are Hudson Clean Energy in New York and Partners Group in Switzerland. They're interested in interconnection, clearly. They want to invest in it. And I think the UK model of cap and floor is a stimulus to bring new and private capital into the sector. Further capital is key to getting these projects built. We all know in this room that each project is done one by one, and we all bear the scars for each project we work in. Whilst I applaud a sort of pan-European planning, which I think is necessary, I think we all know that ultimately there needs to be money in order to do that. And today, sitting here as a PCI project, I applaud what the European Union is doing with PCIs, and we benefit from CF funding, and I'm always humble in front of development capital being the most risky and the most difficult to get. Having a regulatory model that is a good stimulus to bring in capital, I think is a good thing, and I think it'll be good for all projects and hopefully many to follow. Cap and floor, for those who don't know, it provides projects to earn a floor which is close to the cost of debt, and then about 80 basis points above that to return of equity, after which any surplus revenues are returned to consumers. So it's not a project that allows people to become wealthy, but it allows people to make a reasonable return and brings capital in. This model works in the UK at the moment. It's been successful, say, for NEMO, where it's also been applied in Belgium, and we're currently working with the Irish government and regulator to see if cap and floor could also be applied in Ireland. That would allow us to have a symmetrical regulatory model across the Irish Sea, and that would allow us to do one debt raising, and I think ultimately that would make the project cheaper, and that would be in the best interest for consumers. Just a word on technology. I think there's 2 levels of technology that I think would help security of supply across all projects. I think there's a lot of work still to be done around subsea cable installation. I think there's some ways to go. More thought needs to go into that. More thought into joints. So I think there's quite a lot of industrial work that could be done. And as all these projects come on, I noticed that all the suppliers are now thinking harder about how they do this. They're making big investments themselves into ships to lay cables. They're looking at industrializing the jointing process. I think the other area of technology that I would expect to come along is that whilst we are little pinch points across the whole system, I think it'd be better if we knew exactly where these electrons were coming from, whether they're really green, brown, or whatever color they are. It's difficult to tag them, but I think with technology and maybe people in here getting familiar with blockchain and other forms of technology, maybe there's some ways to go to improve that, and therefore improve the efficiency of flows and the distribution of green power across Northwest Europe. And lastly, as you probably can tell from my accent, I'm English, and I can't leave this without mentioning Brexit. Brexit is something that will leave the UK potentially isolated if it pulls out of the internal energy market. And if we pull out of market coupling, I think that's regrettable. However, the Irish regulator's done a fair amount of work looking at that in consideration of Greenlink before it gave its, it tested the public interest test on Greenlink to see whether it should be considered as part of the Irish transmission system. And it came to the conclusion, no matter what form Brexit takes, that Greenlink will be beneficial to consumers. And I think the joining of any country or any large pools of generation and supply and demand for electricity is a good thing. And we should try and encourage that no matter what type of political situation our neighbours are in. So I think with that, I'll hand it back to you, Stefan.
Simon, thank you very much for introducing your projects, and I fully agree. Whatever will be the conclusion of the processes we are going through, we have to go through them now. But for purely geographical reasons, this project will always be needed and beneficial for both Ireland and Great Britain, because it's linking the two islands of Great Britain and the island of Ireland. That will have to be worked out in the future in whatever course of action which we will need to take. But interconnections are always beneficial. There are also interconnections, of course, towards the continent between the UK and Great Britain and the continent, and that the same applies to there. They will never become irrelevant, and therefore I'm fully confident that this project will be fully used also in the future, whatever it will be. It's an electricity project which is very interesting, which is quite I would say obvious in terms of benefits. Yeah? So linking the two islands more closely compared to what exists already, and that I think is crucial. What you said about the nature of electricity and what previously Robert said also, the key objective is creating flexibility here for renewable energy to come in, and then also making sure that the software works well, digitalization, and previously what Erko said, cybersecurity has to be increasingly thought into these issues. But for that we need different options in order to be sure if something happens on one part, then there will be other parts which can still operate. Okay, so with that, I would then give the floor to Adam Balog from the energy community, which links, of course, very well with the TAP project, but of course the energy community is about electricity, gas, but also other forms of cooperation in energy. To tell us more about the challenges in the energy community contracting parties, which, as you certainly know, are the Western Balkan countries which are not yet members of the EU, but also Ukraine, Moldova, and more recently Georgia as members, who have, of course, geographical challenges in their own. They're not directly connected with each other, but we are very happy and we appreciate very much the close cooperation with the Energy Community Secretariat to create mutual benefits for basically both sides. So it's not it's going in one direction, it's going in both directions, and it relates to electricity and gas. For electricity, the cooperation is even more, I would say, automatic, because there's a synchronous area. So we simply are in the same boat, basically, on electricity. We cannot even control that necessarily. It's simply happening. It's a physical phenomenon, and for that reason, it's absolutely essential to be on the same lines, basically, and have a very close cooperation. For gas, it's more like a commodity. Of course, you can cut, but the objective is not to cut any supply, not to cut any pipeline, but rather to build up and make sure that gas can flow in both directions. But Adam, you will tell us more about that, how you work on and how you see these different things.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So it seems to be the morning of how many of you know questions. So how many of you know about the energy community? Okay, that's quite well represented, and thank you, Stefan, for also for the introduction on energy community. So basically, our goal is to harmonize the legislation of these countries that were mentioned by Stefan with that of the European Union in gas, in electricity, in certain energy statistics, in renewables, and energy efficiency labeling, for example, and even with common climate goal settings. So there are some points where I would like to guide you through, but I will always talk about it through the lens of the region, because we understand that security of supply is not a bilateral concept or between two countries or of a single country, but you can understand security of supply only in the context of a region. And what kind of regions do we have? So I will give you the perspective beyond the EU, but we are here on the PCI Days, which is the process of the European Union to select the projects of common interest. And we see the results and the successful developments happening in the last couple of rounds and projects being realized. We are also running a similar process, projects of energy community interest and projects of mutual interest. There is always a confusion. What are these two labels standing for? So basically, it's also the Regulation 347, which is guiding us as adopted and adapted to the energy community. And we are also assessing projects submitted to us in market model, and we are checking their economic feasibility and their impact on energy community countries, but also on the European Union. And the confusion between projects of energy community interest and projects of mutual interest comes from the fact that the regulation sets a limit, namely that if a project is not project of common interest in the EU, it cannot be a project of energy community interest in case it's linking an energy community country to a European Union member state. Now, this has been causing some turmoil between within the contracting parties and project promoters. If we talk about a region and the goal is to have a common energy market, then such caveats should be somehow solved. Regarding going further to the east, we are also running a process in the framework of the EU for Energy project, which is cooperation with Eastern Partnership countries. The energy community is running a chapter of this project, and we are providing technical assistance to Eastern Partnership countries, namely to Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. Now you can see that some of the countries overlap with the contracting parties, so some of them are contracting parties like Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia, some of them are not. We started a similar process to PCI and PETSI PMI, which is a voluntary one, and it's called Projects of Eastern Partnership Interest. Its abbreviation is funny, it's PEPIs. We are always very peppy to talk about these projects. So the goal here is to provide technical assistance and project assessment on a voluntary basis to projects coming from these countries. However, here we also see a regional issue, if we can say so. So, of course, Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova is the northern part of these countries, which are naturally somehow connected, but all of them are connected to their EU member neighbors. And we see a southern region, which is Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. However, if we talk about these three countries, the region is rather Georgia and Armenia, or Georgia and Azerbaijan, because as we know, Azerbaijan and Armenia are not on the best terms. So Georgia is always trying to maneuver with which one, with regards to which project to cooperate with. However, between the South Caucasus region and EU, there is a country called Turkey, without which this region cannot be understood. So here, the definition of the region could be maybe expanded also to check the impact of projects between South Caucasus and Turkey, because Turkey is the major player there with gas consumption, with electricity production, also with link to EU member states. And also we see interesting projects which would link actually the South Caucasus region to Iran. Obviously, it's also not part of this EU for energy concept for now. However, if we check Georgia as an energy community contracting party and the impact of projects with Iran and Turkey, that's how the whole region could be considered together. Now, linking to a point which we always mention, and it comes back to PCIs and projects of energy community interest, is the role of TYNDP. I worked on it myself when I was working at ENTSOG, so I know that it's a very challenging, very interesting, and great and very useful work which is being done, and a huge effort by ENTSOG. And it serves a basis for PCI selection. Energy community contracting parties and projects promoters thereof are also submitting projects into the TYNDP, which as of now, because the mandate from the regulation, of course, does not provide for it, are not being analyzed the same way as EU projects, which is, of course, understandable from the legal point of view. Nevertheless, such projects' impact, which are connecting EU member states and energy community member states, could be or should be seen also on the EU countries. So there would be also a benefit for EU countries to see the impact of such projects, because from Hungary to Greece and from Bulgaria to Croatia or from Italy to Romania, there is a region, Western Balkan, which is not a dark spot on the map, but there are connections. Most of those countries and their TSOs are members of ENTSO-E. That's not the case for ENTSOG. Naturally, the gas networks are not that developed yet, but most of them are observers in ENTSOG. So tighter cooperation with regards to PCIs and the assessment of these projects might be beneficial in the future. For the PETSI PMI process, we have a great cooperation with the DG Energy, and particularly Katerina's SICO's unit, and we are always thankful for their assistance and their presence on our PETSI selection process. And we are running an assessment which is very similar to that of the TYNDP, and we are assessing economic feasibility of the projects as well, down to country level. Now, a couple of more points. I'm cheating, I use my phone, I put some notes there. So coming back to the projects of Eastern Partnership interest, we had a round of call for assessment, and initially there was a huge interest from a number of project promoters and the countries, which when the call actually happened, some of it diminished, and we tend to explain it to ourselves how this region is defined. So there are interesting projects which would link to Turkey, to Iran, as I mentioned, from Belarus to EU neighboring countries, which are not yet in the scope of this voluntary assessment, which might help to increase the number. And as mentioned, security of supply is a regional concept. So what happens on the Belarusian-Polish border, Belarusian-Lithuanian border, of course, with regards to Ukraine, we all know these are all important areas, and it might be worth considering closer cooperation in that regard. That was one part of legal challenges coming out from the Regulation 347. On another ground, we also have Energy Community has an Energy Community Regulatory Board, which has some similarities to Acer, but of course it does not have the capacity and also does not have the powers of Acer. At the same time, our countries are also observers in Acer. They're cooperating with Acer, but Acer does not have jurisdiction over the contracting parties. And ECRB, this Energy Community Regulatory Board, does not have the same power. So there is a bit of also mismatch in the legislation, which might be cleared up jointly, and that might help also for the efficiency of regulation in our countries. There is a very good example for availability of funds, namely the WBIF, Western Balkans Investment Framework, which provides technical assistance and eventually also grants to projects on the Western Balkan only, which of course there are some differences compared to Connecting Europe facility. The co-financing share is much smaller than for EU projects in the Connecting Europe facility, but we see it as a good example, and it helps projects to go ahead and mature further, and helps to develop their engineering, to develop feasibility studies, environmental impact assessments. However, in other contracting parties like Ukraine or Georgia, we have the fund called NIF, a Neighborhood Investment Framework, where it would be maybe advisable to adopt a similar structure as in case of WBIF, where the countries can and the project promoters can independently approach this pot of money in cooperation, of course, with the IFIs like EIB, EBRD, and that could also help to further mature projects in that part or that region of the energy community. And it's important to involve European IFIs in this process. Yes, so some key, just to highlight some important project which directly links to security of supply from our work. So just one example is the Bosnia-Croatia interconnector, which is crucial for the security of supply of Bosnia, and it's helping the market development in Croatia if Bosnia is partially supplied from there. Bosnia's current connection is only from Serbia, and there might be, it seems to be issues with maintenance of the pipeline, so the consumption in Sarajevo is supplied only through that pipeline, and the air quality of Sarajevo is already pretty bad, so if something happens there, then that would be pretty tragical for the consumers and citizens in Sarajevo. This pipeline has a direct security of supply impact, and this would help to solve this issue. And at the same time, as mentioned, such projects which are connecting European Union member states with neighboring countries is helping the market development in the EU countries like Croatia or Hungary or Romania or Bulgaria, because it stirs up a bit the market, maybe the liquidity increases, maybe there are more players, and that is a benefit for EU member states as well, not only for the contracting parties. And that's why we perceive it that it could be considered as an impact in the sense of the Regulation 347 on EU member states. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I give back the floor to Stefan. Thank you.
Adam, thank you very much for explaining the different challenges and in particular for highlighting also the regional dimension. So the regional concept, which is geographical, has a very strong geographical component that we need to look beyond the borders of any political entity and for instance also closely involve Turkey, which is not a member of the energy community, but nonetheless is a key partner for both the eastern neighboring states like Georgia and Azerbaijan, but then of course also the Southeastern European countries, Greece, Bulgaria, and the important thing is to work in a pragmatic manner, basically, to have dialogue, to have communication channels open, and you're playing an enormously important role in that respect by bringing together countries which in the past have had tensions between each other, but each time I attend, for instance, an energy community event, I'm quite impressed by the pragmatic approach by those attending. They try to overcome any maybe historical issues, but rather say we are here now together and see what we can do together. Of course, there are different interests, but these interests have to be at least addressed in a rational manner. And then if you put options on the table, then even if you have maybe first a preference for one or the other for kind of historical or even emotional reasons, then you say, okay, let's do it like this because obviously there are more benefits for that. That includes, for instance, also the options for Bosnia to have more options for gas supply in the future and even internal problems within the country. And they will play an enormously important role. And of course, in the Western Balkans, Serbia is one of the key players which interacts in the future with Bulgaria through a new pipeline, but also Hungary, and then provides also gas to Bosnia. So it's one of the key partners in that respect. Albania, as said, will have access to gas for the first time then with the TAP pipeline once it becomes operational. And that's a big advantage and opportunity for that country as well. Of course, on the other side, Georgia is on the Southern Gas Corridor, so they have a very, very big advantage in that respect as well, and can develop further their gas market thanks to that. Okay, with that, I think very solid introduction and overview on the different aspects for the different projects. ERCO had to leave for the airport on the Baltic Connector, but I think we can open up the questions now from the audience on all of the projects and any comments you would like to make. Would you like to say something? Yes, I see rather badly because it's in the dark, but I just see a hand there, so please go ahead.
I'll be a bit quieter now. When we move towards 2050, we will have to have zero carbon energy system, which, unless we have a phenomenal transformation in power to gas, will kill all the gas interconnectors. And that leaves everything onto electricity system, but there will also be other sources of energy. But then what is not foreseen is that every single country in the European Union, except for 5, maybe 6, is relying by 2040 on interconnectors, imports through interconnectors during times of system stress. Every single one, except 5 or 6 small ones with lots of hydro, mostly. If everyone's importing, who's exporting? Because these times of system stress occur concurrently in neighboring countries. So the sun goes down on a windless winter evening in every single country in Europe simultaneously, almost. We get the Kalte Dunkelflaute, which is a 2-week period of negligible renewable energy generation for 2 whole weeks. And that occurs on the geography of the entirety of Western Europe. If you just look at a few countries and a few days at a time, then that is not once every 2 years, it is frequent. And those kill the interconnectors, because when everyone's importing through interconnectors during times of system stress, no one's got energy to export into the interconnectors. So why is everyone on the panel interconnectors of some kind or another, gas and electricity? Why is so much of the focus of PCIs, of ENSOE, of the energy integration of Europe on interconnection, which are great until 2035, but thereafter are going to die? Why isn't the focus more on storage and enabling other systems that do not rely on importing what's not available to be exported?
Well, if I may, I completely agree with the overall storyline and the scenario you are presenting. Looking at 2050 and COP21 targets, I think we are just scratching the surface. If we really look at it seriously, we do see a role of gas or whatever it is, and we do see a role of seasonal storage, which we do not have available for the time being. So just putting everything on power to gas only might be a risky strategy. However, it is a direction which is at least, let's say, tangible in pilot projects, in demonstration type of projects. Coming back to it, I think it is really important and there we are very happy that in Clean Energy Package, this resource adequacy, probabilistic calculations looking a couple of years ahead in order to see what is happening with, you mentioned Dunkelflaute, with kind of, let's say, probabilistics in wind and solar, which basically will drive at least the electricity part and probably indirectly as well as a linked gas part as well. So if we assume that coal phase out will ask for a couple of replacements in gas-fired power generation, then of course this kind of link will become more crucial. I completely agree that if you would have a silver bullet for type of seasonal storages, more than happy to discuss more in detail. I completely agree with Clean Energy Package provision looking into resource adequacy calculation on a very serious level, including the member states, including the competent authorities in electricity coordination group type of environment. So yes, there are a couple of very important questions to be solved. And no, I think TYNDP is not looking at interconnectors only, it's looking at storages as well. And the more we look at 2050, the more important it will get.
Thanks a lot, Robert, for that. Would any other of you would like to add? From DG Energy's point of view, indeed, we fully agree. I think the improvements which have been made now are creating a very solid evidence basis for making decisions, looking also long-term into the future. And we do play a very high emphasis on storage and also actually the possibilities to decarbonize gas, so to have the clean gas basically in the system, but to still have gas in the long term. So basically the need to import, to shift around gas and electricity will be very relevant and possibly even more relevant in the future. The move to a low carbon economy does not mean that everything will be domestic. There will be a very strong international element, even of importing gas, clean gas, be it hydrogen or biogas, for instance, storage components, but for the electricity system in particular to have interconnections, to have a bigger pool where you can shift around, where you can basically address the variable nature of renewable energy. and that is certainly something which has to be looked at very closely in the upcoming 10-year network development plans and other assessments which look into the future. What else needs to be done, basically? But I think the efforts will not be finished with just putting in place a few PCIs interconnecting, and then that's solved for the future. It's a kind of ongoing process of reflections rolling over, and indeed beyond 2035 we need to see what else is needed. We are also going to launch a study basically on storage, building on what has already been done on storage, in order to identify any further gaps for policy needs, and that I think will then be the basis for actions by the new Commission.
If I may come back on that, I'm very much applauding these initiatives by the Commission, and also the fact that you are looking at storage as well. But unless you address the 2050 issue now, the lead times for implementation of those solutions are going to be too great to achieve 2050 implementation. So we need to be putting major resources in now to those solutions. In addition to which, you quite rightly said that you look a couple of years ahead on your system adequacy. When you look a couple of years ahead on the system adequacy, you develop a sticking plaster or band-aid solution that will solve a particular issue now. Then the next year it's going to be another one, and the next year another one. And you've got lots of band-aids, one on top of the other, while the problem is festering underneath. And worse than that, what you end up with is the big solutions need a revenue stack, and all the band-aids have removed the most remunerative parts of that revenue stack, which therefore means that what remains of the revenue stack is not enough to finance the proper solutions, which therefore increases overall system costs or makes it impossible to achieve the proper solutions.
Very short reply from our side. Yes, it's very important to look at 2015, what it means for 2014, 2030. That is exactly why, together with NSOC, NSOE is putting quite a lot of resources right now into scenario building and looking at the consequences, what this really means. What we can see is that one, it will not be electricity only. Electricity cannot do everything in 2050. So there is some power to X, some power to whatever. We can discuss what it will be, but it will need significant storage, seasonal storage, at least north of the Alps.
Thank you very much. Are there any further comments or questions from the audience on that, or any further remarks from panelists? If that is not the case, I would indeed like to thank you very much for being here for this first panel today, and thank again also the panelists for their comprehensive presentations on their projects and the broader policy challenges which are tackled by NSOE together with NSOC. As you said, it's very important to work together sector-wise, but also by the energy community in their efforts to improve together with us international cooperation with the Eastern Partnership countries, with Turkey, and also Russia. Of course, we have a dialogue with Russia. We are in very close relations with them as well, because in order to underline the mutual interests which we have in cooperation, and that partnership is always better than an approach which divides and tries to single out interests and put them against each other. So with that, I would like to conclude then, if there are no further questions, and wish you a very interesting day still here in the arsenal on the PCIs.
between countries and distribute energy more efficiently. As a result, isolated and peripheral member states will be better integrated into the European energy market. Are you interested in these projects? Get involved now and play an active role. People working in industry can reduce their environmental impact